Once again, council members, we're talking about a parcel of land that's owned by the city in fee, that's been appraised at $3.7 million. Plenty of money for the city general fund to do all sorts of traffic improvements and have some left over for candy. And the fact of the matter is, you're increasing by $100,000 a contribution to the developer, and yet giving him an 80% discount on a $3.7 million parcel. What are we thinking about? What was in the Kool-Aid tonight? Can we have some consideration here? We're talking about the public's welfare and their money into the general fund. What is the problem, council members? Councilmember Brick.
I don't have a problem with it, but in fairness to your question, I'm going to have to ask staff if it's possible. It's not too late to come up and discuss how we came up with the 1.2 from the 3 point whatever at the time. Mr. Ross. I know you explained it earlier, first time around, but I think we need to hear it again.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Two methodologies were used in the appraisal to establish a range in values of between $997,000 to $3.7 million. The lower amount reflects the actual conditions on the property being sold and applies a discount to the properties because of the odd configurations and limited buildability as standalone parcels. The higher amount uses an assumption that these parcels take on the value of the larger 4-acre parcel on a square foot basis. So the lower number better reflects existing conditions. The higher amount makes assumptions of a possible future condition if the project's built.
Mr. Young, I believe you just said that as the intended use develops, as the council majority is indicating you're going to approve, the true value of that parcel to that developer will be $3.7 million, at least according to the appraisal.
An extraordinary assumption was made for that higher amount. The project would have to go forward for that amount to be realized. What the city is selling today with the configurations and the limited utility is closer to the lower amount, the $997,000.
Projects on the verge of being approved, it's not an exceptional consideration that it will be built and that the value of that parcel, based on the whole parcel's value, as you just said, is going to be around $3.7 million. Am I misstating what you said?
I think a way to look at it would be escrow is closing in 60 days after approval. In order for that higher amount to be realized, a lot would have to happen, and the project would have to go forward. There would have to be, and if you look at the history as well, the Platte project was fully entitled and vacated. The project was never ever built, and the streets were never ever vacated. So if that happened, they would be essentially purchasing a property where that value was never ever realized. So I guess I'll just restate. The lower amount, it better reflects the value today and what is being sold. If you put a for sale sign on that site today, that is the closer value.
The value of the property is based on the value to the property owner. No one else is going to buy the property. It's been sitting there since the 20s. It's going to be purchased specifically to develop the project. The project will assume the value. We can have a condition in there, if they don't build it, we'll give them the $3.7 million back, we'll take the street back, as far as I'm concerned. But that's what it will be worth, because the project cannot be built without it. Mr. Scott.
Well, I think that it's a simplified use of the analysis to say that it's one or the other, without understanding that every appraisal that's ever done on property is based on assumptions, and it's based on assumptions that vary depending on the analysis that the user puts it to. That's why so many times when you have appraisals, you'll end up in court on it because the two parties will have very different basic assumptions on what's going to happen with the property. That's happened here too. The same appraiser can come up with different values based on these different assumptions, and that's what's happened. What I tried to explain last time is that typically on these kinds of properties, these remnant parcels that end up in a city's possession, it's usually an accident of history that the city ends up owning it in fee in the first place. Typically, it's because it's so old that back in the days when these kinds of dedications were done, people actually dedicated fee instead of just rights of way. And typically today, most of the property we'd be looking at would be a situation where somebody would have the actual underlying fee, and all we'd be dealing with is getting rid of the city's right of way to use it for a street purpose. So what I tried to say last time is that I think when a city looks at how it's going to value these remnant kinds of parcels, the city needs to say, okay, we need to have a policy that we're going to consistently apply in our city, not on the basis of whether the person who's buying it has the wherewithal to buy it, but on the basis of something equitable that can be applied throughout the city as pieces come available to abandon and for somebody to acquire. Or you get yourself in a situation where you'll end up with a piece adjacent to somebody's residential property who couldn't possibly afford to buy it at full value for the property as if they were developing the entire site. I just have found that it's a bad idea to try to value these things at the most money that you can possibly get off of it, because the parcels really only have value in a case like this because of the substantial amount of investment that the person who is doing the project is investing in it. To give it that full absolute value that the middle of that site has, to me, is not a logical thing to assume in assuming the value. I think you have to look at what the remnant is worth. Somehow it's got to be worth less than what the full value of a piece of property right in the middle of that site is worth. Now, the city council could discuss whether or not you can discuss it at the full $3 million value, you could discuss it at the 1.2 value, or you could discuss it as being worth something with a different discount than the one that's been presented to the city council. So I think it's fair to consider what you're proposing. I think it's also fair and certainly not inappropriate that the other price is on the table for consideration. And I think the city council's policy decision is how much of a discount, if any, is applicable to these remnant pieces of property in this particular case. We wanted to have that discussion before we got to this point, but we felt in the interest of the public it was better we have this discussion in public. At the time we said it will be awkward when we have this discussion in the public, because it's awkward to have this kind of thing go on where people can see sausage being made. But I think it's appropriate for the city council to have that discussion and decide if there's going to be a discount, what's the right discount, and come up with a number.
I appreciate those comments, Mr. Scott, and I'd be more than happy to entertain from the council members any modification, but 70 to 80% discount, I think, goes far afield of your comments. I think somewhere in between would be perfectly willing to discuss. Somewhere north of a 70 or 80% discount. I mean, it's like just amazing in this situation. You can't help but realize the value. Even if it was a 40% discount, it's still a substantial concession in the consideration, and it's a significant difference of dollars for our general fund. So I would, again, leave it to the majority of the council for consideration. If not, I just don't know how you can find to give it away at bargain basement at this situation. It's a unique situation, and to just give it away at that 80% or 70% discount is just unfathomable to me. Thank you.